What's up guys, my name is Ace, and welcome back to another gun guide. This is the series where I cover all of the stats of every one of the earnable weapons in Black Ops 4 multiplayer. In today's episode, we're going to be covering the Grav, or as many of you guys know it from Black Ops 1, the Galil. And first up, as always, let's have a look at its damage profile. With the Grav, we have a damage profile of 40, 32, which means it's going to be a 4 to 5 shot kill in core game modes, and always a 1-shot kill in hardcore, unless you're shooting through cover or unless their health is boosted by crash. Our rate of fire is actually identical to the base rate of fire of the Can-57 at 550 rounds per minute, and we don't have any option of using rapid fire on this gun. This means our statistical minimum time to kill up close is going to be very fast, just like with the KN, at 327 milliseconds. When we get into that 5-shot kill range, however, it does drop off fairly drastically all the way down to 436 milliseconds, which isn't really all that competitive with a lot of the other guns. So we can already see that this gun has a lot of killing potential, but it's not a very forgiving gun if you're missing your shots. As for the Grav against body armor, in core game modes, if you're not using FMJ, it will take you 1 extra shot to kill at all ranges, and in hardcore, it will still be a 1-shot kill up close, but it will drop off to a 2-shot kill if the enemy is using body armor. As for our ranges, as you can see here, our 4-shot kill range will extend out to 17 meters, which is a little bit better than the Can-57, but it's not really all that impressive for an assault rifle. When we add a suppressor, this will reduce that 4-shot kill range by about 20%, and long barrel will actually double our 4-shot kill range. So long barrel is a very good attachment on the Grav, and just keep in mind, if you combine suppressor and long barrel, you will get a net increase to your base 4-shot kill range of 60%. As for hardcore, this is always going to be a 1-shot kill unless you're shooting through cover or unless the enemy has their health boosted by crash, or like I said, if they have body armor beyond 17 meters, it will be a 2-shot kill, but you can counteract that by using FMJ. Moving on to headshots, we get a standard headshot multiplier for the Grav of 1.1, which gives us a headshot damage profile of 44-35, and what this means is headshots are effectively useless on this gun. Don't bother going for them unless you're going for those camo challenges. They're not going to change the number of shots it takes to kill. As for hipfire, as you can see here, we get a standard hipfire spread for the assault rifle category. It's the same as all of the other ones. And with laser sight, we can cut that down fairly considerably by roughly 40%, which is quite helpful. This brings us to idle sway, and as you can see here, there is very little idle sway with the Grav. When you're aiming down sight, it does move around really slightly, but generally speaking, this will have no impact whatsoever on your first shot accuracy. As for recoil, as you can see here, the Grav has some pretty strange recoil. The recoil after the first shot is pretty extreme. It kicks upwards and to the right suddenly after that first shot by a large margin. After that, though, it's relatively moderate recoil. It still kicks a little bit upwards and to the right, but it's very manageable, very controllable. It's just that first shot recoil that can really throw you off in some situations. With the grip attachment, we can cut that down quite nicely, and you can see we get a much better recoil pattern, and you don't get that huge jump from the first shot that you fire. And we also have grip 2, which will tighten that up even further. And in addition to that, just like with the ICR and the GKS, it will reduce the flinch. It will essentially eliminate the flinch when enemies shoot you. So I feel using at least one of the grip attachments is very helpful on the Grav because that first shot recoil is just so extreme if you're not using those attachments. However, we're not quite done with recoil yet. There's something else you can use that is very effective for reducing recoil, and this is the recon sight. As you can see here, this is the Grav with only a recon sight equipped here. There's no grip or anything like that, and you can see the recoil pattern is great. It's actually a little bit better than just using a single grip attachment. This is very important to know because when you get to your create a class, instead of potentially using a wildcard in order to get a grip attachment, you can simply use a recon sight, which will basically give you a grip built into the gun. But moving on from there, we're going to be getting into our magazine capacity, which is 35 rounds with 105 total starting ammo, which is pretty good considering this has a relatively slow fire rate, so it does take you a while to get through that magazine. But if you want to take this to the next level, you can use extended mags, which will bump that up to 55 rounds with 165 total starting ammo, which is basically like LMG level. As for our reload add time, it is the slowest in the assault rifle category at 1.8 seconds, and this is definitely a noticeable downside to this gun. Additionally, there is no way to reduce this reload time at all. We don't have fast mags or hybrid mags or anything like that. You are stuck with this slow reload time. But with that, we're going to move into the handling and mobility stats, and this brings us to the next big downside with the Grav, and this is its aim down sight time. For its base aim down sight time, this is 330 milliseconds, which is basically LMG level. This is very, very slow, and you'll definitely notice this in game. Now we can cut that down significantly with the quick draw attachment, which is unlocked fairly late in the leveling, and this will reduce our aim down sight time down to 260 milliseconds, which is much more competitive, and therefore I would say quick draw is basically a crutch attachment on the Grav. As for our sprint out time, this is pretty standard for the assault rifle category at 300 milliseconds, and with gung ho you can cut this down to 250 milliseconds. For our movement speed, this is standard for assault rifles at 95%. Our aim down sight strafe speed is also standard at 40%, and we do have the ability to use a stock attachment, which will increase our aim down sight strafe speed up to 69%. And with that pretty much covers it for all of the important stats on the Grav. Now let's get into the attachments. For optics, we only have the ability to use 3 different optical attachments. We have the reflex sight, the recon sight, and the thermal sight. Personally, I have no issue whatsoever with the iron sights on this gun. However, like you saw earlier, the recon sight is excellent at reducing recoil, and therefore I highly recommend that. Or if you want, I realize a lot of people really like using a reflex sight just because it is the least obstructive sight and it has a nice zoom level. It doesn't reduce your recoil, but the reflex sight is also nice to use sometimes. As for the other attachments on the Grav, we have access to both of those grip attachments, which, like I said, if you want to stack those, you can pretty much eliminate the flinch that you have when you get shot, which is a really nice perk to have. But even if you're not using both of the grip attachments, I do recommend using at least one grip attachment or the recon sight, just in order to cut that initial recoil down, because you saw how extreme that is when we looked at our recoil testing. As for long barrel, this is also an excellent attachment with the Grav. You saw that the 4-shot kill range isn't really all that impressive with this gun, and you can literally double it with the long barrel, which is awesome. Suppressor, that really comes down to the playstyle that you're going for. I know a lot of people really have fond memories of the suppressed Galil from Black Ops 1, so I can understand why you'd want to use it, and it can be fun to use it suppressed. But just keep in mind that 4-shot kill range is going to be cut down for you. FMJ, generally speaking, I don't use that. I don't tend to run into too many people with body armor these days, at least in core game modes, so I don't really use FMJ. Laser sight, I feel, is a good option if you're not using quick draw, because the standard hip fire just doesn't work so well with this gun since it has a slower fire rate. And therefore, if you get yourself in a close quarter situation with that really slow aim down sight time, it's nice to have that ability to hip fire somewhat accurately. Extended mags, I feel, is pretty unnecessary with this gun. It's a nice bonus, but you really don't need it. And this just leaves us with stock, which is always a nice choice for an assault rifle if you're that type of player that likes to strafe in their gunfights or strafe around corners. And with that, it's now time to move into a couple great example classes I have for you guys with the Grav. This first one is designed to be a really solid, all-around sort of gunfight winning machine. With this, we're using that recon sight in order to reduce our recoil. We're using quick draw, which is pretty much necessary on this gun. Stock, which helps us strafe in those gunfights a little bit, makes us a harder target to hit. And long barrel, so we can double that 4-shot kill range and be much more effective with this gun. Our gear for this is going to be stim shot, so we can get back in the fight as soon as possible after taking damage. And for our perks, we've got my standard perk loadout, which is quick draw, so we don't run out of ammo and we can go on a longer streak. Gung ho to help with that sprint out time. And finally, dead silence, so nobody can pick us up on acoustic sensors very easily. And we're not going to be stomping around like an elephant. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, this is my all-around sort of Grav class that I've been actually finding quite a bit of success with lately. As for the second class setup I'm going to share with you guys today, this is that classic sort of suppressed Grav class setup. With this one, obviously, we're using the suppressor. We've also got quick draw in here, and we're going to be using grip. I realize I could be using a recon sight instead of grip in order to get better recoil, and we wouldn't have to use a wildcard, but I really like using the iron sights with this particular class setup, and therefore I am willing to spend that extra class point here. For our secondary, we are going to be using a launcher, and this allows us to shoot down UAVs if enemies happen to call them in. And I would actually much rather do that than try and use the ghost perk on this class, because the ghost perk in this game is absolutely terrible. For our gear, we're going to be using acoustic sensor this time, which is just a little bit of a change up. We're going to be flanking the enemies a lot more with this class, and therefore we don't have to rely on stim shot quite as much. And acoustic sensor just helps with our awareness as we get in towards the enemy spawn. And then when it comes to perks, once again, we've just got my standard perk loadout. This is just, in my opinion, the optimized perk loadout for this game. And with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's episode on the Grav. As for my personal thoughts on this gun, I feel like it kind of falls somewhere in the middle with the assault rifles. It's not amazing by any means. I wouldn't classify this as a top tier assault rifle. But then again, it's not bad. It's not a horrible gun by any means. It definitely has some reliance on attachments like quick draw, for instance. If you're not using quick draw on this gun, you're definitely putting yourself at a big disadvantage. And then also, it's got that weird recoil property where after that first shot, you get a massive jump in your recoil, which is just a little bit strange to deal with. In all, if I had to choose between this and something like the Can-57, for instance, I'm going to be going with the Can-57 pretty much every single time. And I may do another versus episode with Can-57 versus the Grav, since they are very similar in a lot of ways. But that's just my personal thoughts on this. Of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about the Grav so far? Do you think it's a top tier gun, lower tier gun, somewhere in the middle? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, if you guys have missed any of the previous episodes of Gun Guides, I will leave a link to the playlist down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.